This session's called Service Learning at DMU, follows on nicely from the presentation I just gave, hopefully. And it's the emergent field that uses learning for good to deliver impact. And we're going to, in this session, give you an overview of the project that we've been working on for just over 12 months now. Actually started not in lockdown, so that's always fond memories of the way we were, but nevertheless we've made some great progress during the lockdown era that we can share with you. So we'll give you the overview of the project, its findings, and within the findings the types of activities that are going on at DMU, examples of mutual benefit, examples of assessments, which I know some people had asked about in the previous session, and levels of staff engagement. And then we can have a bit of a discussion, and there's the opportunity for you to get involved in that and how we might support you to do that. So in this this project, which I should say it's been led by the Centre of Academic Innovation, the Directorate of Social Impact and Engagement, and DMU Education for Sustainable Development. So it's been a really strong collaboration with lots of different people taking part from different areas of the university. And we wanted to look at how service learning was currently understood, implemented, and its future potential at DMU. And it comes sort of adds strength to some of the ideas that I was mentioning in the last session, in that we're a very public facing university, and we've amongst our staff we've always had a will to support our communities. And we did a survey as part of the project to try to conduct a mini audit, I suppose you would say, against the criteria of the European Observatory definition for service learning, which is there. And the interesting thing, I won't read it out directly, but there are 6 points within that definition that we were able to score. If score's the right word, or match the some of the ongoing practices at the university against the definition presented there. And it was the scoring leaned heavily around what students were learning, was there social benefit to this work. So those core values underpin this work. And do you want to talk us through this slide, Sarah, as you?
Yeah. So as Mark highlighted, we broke down the definition into kind of 6 distinct areas that we felt service learning could be defined as, because what we were finding was that when we were engaging with a lot of staff, there were elements of service learning within their practice, but they perhaps didn't meet the definition in its entirety. So we wanted to interrogate that a bit to see how many programs we had where we could absolutely tick to say all the different components that make up a service learning program, and so that there is activity in the community, so that there's reflective practice, so that there's an element of assessment in there. How many programs do we have where all 6 are actually ticked, and then where do we have clusters where maybe they're hitting quite a few of them but they're not quite hitting the full definition? So we broke down the responses by faculty just so that we could see if we had any trends across different programs, and the results that came out were captured in that table there, that we had about 6 programs from the 27 that responded that ticked every single element, and we could class those 6 as service learning. And then the others kind of broke down into whether there were a couple where they just missed it by 1. There was some where there was actually no evidence at all of any service learning practice, but maybe an intention to do so in the future. So that's how we break the table down. And then I think the next few slides, Mark, kind of go through those findings in a bit more detail. Do you want me to?
As you're in the flow.
I'm in the flow. Shall I just keep going?
Yeah.
So as I said, 6 of those submissions demonstrated all 6 elements. 3 of the examples came from courses where service learning reflected the discipline. So where we've found where you've got courses, things like social work or nursing, for example, will be another good example, where you've got already embedded, whether it's referred to as service learning or not, you've got experiential learning embedded in the discipline already in terms of the learning outcomes and how it works. So we saw some of that come through in this. But we also saw that actually that didn't make up the majority, which surprised us a bit. And there was some really innovative practice going on in disciplines that you wouldn't necessarily associate with something like service learning, as a way of engaging students in that discipline and in the content of the programme. So where that was really interesting was on some of the arts and humanities based programmes, where we didn't expect to find it in so much detail, but we were really pleased to find it, and things like where maybe students are studying things like public policy, but actually through the way that that is taught, they were connecting students with communities to see how that public policy is then actually lived as an experience within the communities, and not just learning about it from a theoretical perspective. So where we had some of the programs that just missed it by 1, we looked at what the missing element was, and for one of them it was just that there was no evidence that actually there was reflective learning as part of the program. That's an essential element of service learning, is actually how you reflect on your practice, and in one of the examples, although absolutely it was service learning at its heart, it was engaging with the community, it was even assessed, but there was no reflective learning practice within that program. And then another one, again, all of it was there, including the reflective learning, but because it was done as an extracurricular activity, there was no way that it was assessed as part of the student's overall degree outcome. So with both of those, we felt that actually if they work really well, there's no necessity necessarily to change them. But if the people running those programs wanted to, it'd be relatively straightforward to build in, well, certainly to build in the reflective learning element, and probably slightly more challenging to make it an essential component of the taught curriculum. But it was definitely things that if people wanted to absorb and change, that we could look at how you would then make that a full service learning module or program.
So I'll give you a little rest there.
Thanks.
But yeah, there are other examples. One that hit the key elements of the definition, working on a real world problem, and also live briefs with industry. But the fieldwork constituted site visits rather than work with the organisation. Another example fell short because of it didn't include an element of direct service with the community, and therefore no reflective work on that engagement. However, the course did engage with real world issues. And a final example was that used extracurricular international trips on its programme. We have it within the university, lots of degrees which in normal times have DMU global activities embedded within their course. So it was quite interesting for us to consider this in an international context. But it wasn't embedded as part, in this case at least, wasn't embedded as part of the assessed curriculum, but was still a good example of community engagement. 4 of the responses evidenced no service learning at all. Yet within these, although that sounds fairly negative, these were sent from people who were saying, well, we don't, but we're quite interested in developing this. There was a real will in the feedback that we got, that people wanted to try and have some external impact beyond their teaching. And we just took this as that people had recognised the potential of service learning and a willingness to engage and develop it at the university. So mutual benefit is one of the key principles of service learning, and 8 respondents evidenced working community with little or no evidence that would benefit the community partner. And this in this context, it's not a criticism of those courses. It's just, it seems to be a trend in higher education that sometimes students go out into the community, they take what they need, and then they don't worry about what happens to the organisation which they partnered with. And that's something that ultimately, if you're a university committed to community engagement, that's quite detrimental to what you're trying to achieve. And it was really really useful knowledge for us to understand that, and also again presented opportunities for us to develop that work with those academics. Just 2 respondents to the survey were viewed as having some evidence of mutual benefit, and in both cases indicated opportunities for the teaching to be developed further to meet the definition. So again, it's this willingness that the course leads or the module leads think, well, we think we've got something here, but we just need to take it on a little bit further to address that issue of mutuality. And again, like the previous slide, there's just a real willingness within the university's teaching community to explore this agenda and see where we can develop. Assessments, which I know stimulated some good questions in the previous session. Of the 19 responses, just 4 assessed as a result of this type of activity. The examples of assessment varied greatly, many of which Sarah alluded to in her opening slides. Another 5 academics said the service learning was not directly assessed, but the students were encouraged to reflect on what they had learned as part of their essays and dissertations, which were ultimately assessed. What we're taking from this is that there's no uniform pattern that's emerging, but it might be that this is something to be embraced, that this is something that the assessment can be something that works for the module lead or the course lead, rather than everyone trying to move in one particular direction to make sure there's a uniform assessment, because that might not be necessary. Staff engagement. The engagement in this project has been interesting to me because it's continually grown, and I think it's continually grown because people are learning what service learning means, and I think that's been a massive problem throughout this process. So there's evidence of a strong desire for people to provide real world experiences for their students. There was less evidence of how a unified approach to this might be achieved, and as I said before, that might not necessarily be necessary. We did a series of focus groups and discussions, and there was lots of interest in how community elements were embedded in this, and I think that this says a lot about the university, that we have staff here who really want to share their work with communities for this benefit, and I think this is something that really adds strength to the project going forward. It seems to me that people want to do this and want this to become part of their project, part of their teaching, sorry. And a key area of consideration is academic discipline, where some may have little leeway for change, and in fact some courses are taught in a specific way and don't have the opportunity to introduce new modules or to adopt new modules, but there are still many over 200 that do, so there's still an opportunity to really grow this work. And these were opportunities and barriers that were found, which form an interesting basis for discussion. So we can talk a little bit now. I'm not prescribing these questions. These are just things that have occurred to us over time that that you might want to consider yourself, like what are your barriers to adopting service learning? Are you aware of the support that DMU Local and CHI and ESD can offer you? Some feedback on whether you're interested in this agenda and seeing it developed would be useful. What sort of support would you need, and what ideas you might have to move this agenda forward? Because today, actually, with me giving the keynote with Heather, and this session today is really going to inform what we do, myself and Mamadou and Sarah, over the next 12 months to try and take some of these ideas forward and support staff at the university who want to develop in this area. So it would be great to hear from people and see what they have to say. And again, these aren't, I'm not being prescriptive. We will literally answer anything within reason that you ask. So if you want to get involved, you can email me, and then I'll filter the emails out to the appropriate people to give you support. There's some really good service learning resources developing on the ESD website at DMU. You can follow the link on there, or you can just Google ESD at DMU and it comes up. There's a really good community of practice for public engagement being developed by Fee Donovan, who's the head of public engagement at DMU, and I would definitely encourage people who are doing community focused work to get involved with that, because we've had one session so far and there were more than 20 people turned up, and some of the experiences people were sharing were really valuable, and it was a really collegiate network and something that we intend to grow, and offers a real piece of support to those who are thinking about developing this practice or want to share their good practice. And also look out for future events from CHI, of which we'll be considering after these sessions which ones will be appropriate to answer some of the challenges that our staff faces.